Welcome to the Pro Ticker Deep Dive.
It's really great to be here.
Today is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. And I have to say, just looking at the absolute mountain of research, the news wires, legal briefs, market data we have piled up on the desk today, I don't think we have ever seen a single day quite like this one.
It really is a convergence, isn't it? Because usually in this business, you get a theme for the day. You get a big day in tech where a new gadget launches, or a big day in the courts where a ruling comes down, or maybe a Federal Reserve speech that rattles the bond market.
Right, but today
We effectively have all three happening simultaneously, and they are all interacting with each other.
it feels like a perfect storm. You have the judicial branch, the executive branch, central bankers, and the tech sector all colliding at once. It is arguably the most chaotic yet defining 24 hours for the global economy we've seen in years.
Absolutely. And what's wild is that if you just glanced at the headlines this morning, you might think these are totally separate stories. Like, oh, the Supreme Court did a thing, and oh, that major chip company is reporting earnings.
But they're not separate.
No, not at all. If you look at the threads we are pulling today, and we have a lot of them to get through, they all weave into this single story of a fracturing, multidimensional global economy.
A multi-dimensional economy. I like that. It sounds a bit sci-fi, but it feels very real right now.
It is real. We are seeing the rules of trade being rewritten in real time by the Supreme Court. We are seeing the fundamental nature of labor being questioned by the Federal Reserve. And we are holding our breath for what is essentially the Super Bowl of the stock market tomorrow.
Right, so let's tease out these three pillars before we get into the weeds, because there's a lot of signal to separate from the noise here for you, the listener. First up, we have what I am calling the trade whiplash.
A very apt name for it, honestly. It's been a complete roller coaster.
We had a landmark Supreme Court ruling this morning that struck down a major tariff tool, the IEEPA, which everyone thought would instantly lower costs. But then, literally within hours, the administration pivoted to a different, perhaps even more volatile, legal authority.
Exactly. It went from, these tariffs are illegal to here's a global 15% tariff on everything in the blink of an eye. It's a legal and economic 180 that has businesses reeling today. We're talking about supply chain managers tearing their hair out right now.
Then, pillar number two, we have the labor paradox. We had Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook speaking today, and she highlighted a trend that is equal parts exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, she explicitly used the term creative destruction, citing Schumpeter. Her core argument is that productivity is skyrocketing because of AI, which sounds great on paper. I mean, we all want to be more productive. But she warned that it is hitting white-collar jobs, specifically coders and recent university grads, much harder and faster than anyone expected. It's the flip side of the coin.
And finally, the main event. The market is basically flat today because everyone is terrified to make a move before tomorrow. We are waiting for the earnings report of the world's most important chip company.
Right. They report tomorrow, and at this point, they aren't just a tech company. They are effectively the central bank of the digital economy. Their guidance dictates global sentiment.
So our mission today on this deep dive is to connect these dots. How does a tariff fight in Washington, a speech about unemployment, and a chip shortage in Taiwan all tell the exact same story?
It's the story of a world splitting in two. You have the AI economy versus the traditional economy. You have nations with compute power versus those without. And you have the sheer chaos of transitioning from one system to the other.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the macro whiplash, because this is the news that is hitting the wires right now and has everyone confused.
Right. Let's get into the legal weeds a bit here.
Take us back to the Supreme Court ruling this morning. This was regarding the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This has been the administration's favorite tool for a while. What exactly happened?
So to understand why this matters, you have to understand how we've been running trade policy for the last few years. The administration has been using IEPA as a sort of Swiss Army knife.
Right.
The act was originally passed in 1977 and was designed to allow the president to regulate commerce during a national emergency. So think war, or a massive cyber attack, or a hostage crisis.
Like imposing sanctions on a hostile nation.
Exactly. That's the traditional use. But recently, the argument from the White House was much broader. They argued, well, the drug crisis is an emergency, the trade deficit is an emergency, the loss of manufacturing jobs is an emergency. Therefore, I can use IEPA to impose tariffs on anyone I want to fix those emergencies.
So they were really stretching the definition of emergency to cover basically broad economic policy.
Precisely. And for a long time, it worked. The courts moved slowly. But the Supreme Court finally had their say today on whether that logic holds water.
Right.
They shut it down. In a 6-3 ruling, the court said no, you cannot do that. They ruled that the power to regulate importation does not grant the president the authority to impose revenue-raising tariffs under that specific act. They drew a very hard line. Tariffs are taxes. And under the Constitution, who has the power to tax?
Congress.
Congress, not the president, not the executive branch.
Wow, that sounds like a huge blow to the administration's trade strategy. It basically pulls the rug right out from under them.
It was massive. It effectively invalidated the legal foundation for a huge chunk of the current trade strategy, specifically those reciprocal tariffs and the ones tied to the fentanyl crisis. For a few hours this morning, the free trade advocates were taking a victory lap. Stocks and retail companies popped. It looked like the era of executive order tariffs was over.
But that victory lap didn't last long, did it? I imagine the lights were burning pretty bright in the White House counsel's office this morning.
Not even a day. The immediate reaction from the administration was not to back down, but to pivot. They dug deep into the legal archives. I mean, we're talking about law books that haven't been dusted off in decades. And they pulled out something called Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974.
Section 122. I feel like we're getting a law degree today. I've been analyzing these markets for a long time, and I rarely hear Section 122 mentioned. What is it?
It's a fascinating, rarely used provision. It allows the president to impose tariffs specifically to address fundamental international payments problems.
Payments problems. What does that mean in plain English for the listener?
It means the balance of payments. Essentially, if the U.S. has a massive deficit, meaning more money is leaving the country to buy imports than is coming in from exports, the president can slap tariffs on imports to try and stop the bleeding.
And since we run a deficit with almost everyone,
Exactly. We definitely qualify under the text of the law.
Yeah.
So they just switched the justification from national emergency under IEPA to balance of payments under Section 122.
it's a legal sleight of hand, basically saying, I can't tax you because of drugs, so I'll tax you because of the deficit.
Precisely. And the numbers they announced are incredibly aggressive. Immediately following the ruling, they announced a 10% global tariff on all imports. And just today, literally as we were walking into the studio, we're seeing new threats pushing that number to 15% effective today.
Wait, 15% on everything, not just China.
Global. That's the nature of Section 122. It's a blunt instrument designed to stop money from leaving the country entirely. It applies to Canada, Mexico, Europe, Vietnam, everyone.
That is going to cause a massive diplomatic headache. But here is the catch, and this is where it gets really interesting for anyone trying to plan a business for the rest of 2026. This authority isn't infinite, right?
No, it's not. And this is the critical detail. This authority has a hard time limit. It expires in 150 days unless Congress votes to extend it.
150 days, that puts us right in the middle of the summer.
Exactly. So we are looking at a scenario where we have a massive tariff wall go up today, but we know it might come crashing down in 5 months.
Oh, wow. So imagine you are a business leader, say you're running a retail chain or an auto manufacturer. That uncertainty is actually worse than the tax itself.
Much worse. Before this ruling, businesses were dealing with effective tariff rates of around 17%, which was the highest since the 1930s. It was painful, yes, but it was somewhat predictable. You could model it in Excel. You could tell your shareholders, hey, this is our cost structure for the year.
Now,
You have the chaos of the court ruling technically wiping those out, followed instantly by the reimposition of new tariffs that might only last 150 days. How do you sign a supply contract in that environment? Do you price your goods, assuming the 15% is permanent? If you do, and the tariff expires, your competitor who waited will completely undercut you.
but if you eat the cost hoping it goes away, and then Congress extends it, you go bankrupt.
Exactly. You're paralyzed. Most will likely freeze their investments until they see which way the wind blows.
And there's another layer to this mess that I want to touch on, which is the refund chaos.
Oh, this is going to be a complete mess.
Because if the Supreme Court said the old tariffs under IEPA were illegal,
Then theoretically, the government owes importers billions of dollars in refunds for the tariffs they paid over the last 2 years.
I assume the administration is just writing those checks as we speak.
Hardly. They are resisting tooth and nail. It is setting up a massive bureaucratic fight. Importers are going to be filing claims. The government is going to be fighting them in appellate courts. And meanwhile, all that cash flow is just tied up.
So companies have their capital trapped in a legal dispute with the government while simultaneously getting hit with a new 15% global tariff they didn't plan for.
It's a huge liquidity squeeze. You have companies with millions of dollars effectively frozen in legal limbo. It's a logistical nightmare.
So, looking at the broader economic backdrop here, we have this intense legal and trade chaos. What does the rest of the economy look like right now amidst all this?
It's incredibly fragile. We are looking at an economy that is trying to land a plane in a crosswind. Inflation is what economists call sticky. It's hovering around 3%, refusing to come down to that 2% target.
And a 15% global tariff isn't exactly deflationary.
No, not at all. Tariffs generally get passed on to the consumer, so prices might tick up again.
And the recession risk.
Still being priced in at roughly 35% for 2026. But the most important dynamic, the one we really need to focus on, is the K-shaped economy. We've talked about this before in other deep dives, but it is intensifying. It's no longer just rich versus poor. It is AI-driven sectors going straight up versus everything else going down.
Which segues perfectly into our second pillar. We have the trade chaos on one side, and then today we have the Federal Reserve weighing in on the other side of that key-shape, well, the labor market.
Yes. Governor Lisa Cook gave a speech today that is going to be dissected by economists for months. It wasn't your standard, we are monitoring inflation boilerplate speech.
She explicitly linked AI adoption to creative destruction. Now, we hear that term a lot in business school, but hearing a Fed governor say it out loud feels heavy. It implies a level of systemic shock.
It is heavy. Joseph Schumpeter coined the term in the 1940s. The idea is that capitalism is an evolutionary process. For new industries to be born, old ones must be destroyed. It's a very biological view of the economy.
And she thinks we are in a destruction phase.
She thinks we were deep in the transition. Cook is saying that AI is boosting productivity significantly, and that's the creation part. It's democratizing innovation, letting more people invent things. But she warned that we are entering the most significant workforce reorganization in generations.
And that's the scary part. What was the specific warning she gave? Because usually when we talk about automation, we talk about blue-collar jobs like factory arms and trucking.
That's the old paradigm. That was the story of the 20th century. Cook pointed out that labor demand is visibly declining right now in very specific high-skill sectors, the most notable one being computer programming and coding.
That is ironic, right? The people who built the AI are the first ones feeling the heat.
It's what she called the entry-level crisis. Unemployment among recent university graduates is ticking up. Why? Because employers are using what's called agentic AI to handle those junior-level tasks.
Agentic AI. Break that down for us.
So agentic means the AI has agency. It doesn't just answer a question in a chat window. It performs a multi-step task. It can write basic code, debug it, summarize documents, do initial data analysis, format a presentation.
The exact stuff you used to hire a fresh grad to do so they could learn the ropes, the grunt work.
Exactly. That grunt work was the training ground. You hired a junior analyst not because they were brilliant on day one, but because after 2 years of grunt work, they would understand the business and become a senior analyst.
But if the AI does the grunt work better and cheaper,
you just don't hire the junior. And that is creating a massive gap. Unemployment for fresh grads is rising, while the demand for senior, experienced architects is skyrocketing.
that is scary for the workforce pipeline. I mean, if you don't hire the juniors today, where do the seniors come from in 5 years? You're cutting off the bottom rung of the ladder entirely.
That is the long-term structural problem that companies are frankly ignoring right now because the short-term productivity gains are just so good. But the short-term problem for the Fed is the monetary policy dilemma. This is the so what for the central bankers.
Break that down. Usually, if unemployment goes up, the Fed cuts rates to stimulate demand, right? That's their dual mandate. Stable prices and maximum employment.
Exactly. If people are losing jobs, you cut rates, cheap money flows, businesses start hiring again. But here is the trap. Because AI is increasing productivity so much, the broader economy might keep growing while unemployment for these knowledge workers rises.
So GDP goes up, but jobs go down.
Right. And if the Fed cuts rates to help those unemployed coders and grads, they might just trigger massive inflation because the economy isn't actually weak, it's just changing. It's highly efficient, but exclusive.
That is a nightmare for a central banker. You have no good lever to pull. If you cut rates, you get inflation. If you hold rates, the grads stay unemployed.
And Cook even mentioned that the neutral rate of interest, which is the theoretical interest rate that neither stimulates nor slows the economy, might actually be higher now.
Why would the neutral rate be higher?
Because of the massive investment boom. When you have companies pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into data centers and chips, which we will get to in a minute, the demand for capital is huge. That pushes the baseline cost of money up. So we might be looking at a world where rates just stay high, unemployment for grads keeps creeping up, and yet the economy keeps growing.
That plays right into that constructive but fragile outlook we are seeing everywhere. It emphasizes the anxiety of what Cook called job displacement preceding job creation.
We are in the messy middle part of the transition. The new jobs that AI will inevitably create haven't fully appeared yet, but the old jobs are disappearing right now.
And that transition period is where political instability and economic anxiety really take root. It's incredibly hard to tell a kid with a fresh computer science degree, hey, don't worry, in 10 years there might be a whole new job category for you.
Exactly. It doesn't pay their rent today.
So we have trade chaos, we have labor displacement. But if you look at the stock market, or at least one specific part of it, it's like a completely different universe. Let's move to the trillion-dollar pendulum.
Main event.
The market is flat today. Why? Because everyone is waiting for tomorrow. The earnings report from the world's leading GPU manufacturer.
It is fascinating to watch this play out. This single company now makes up nearly 8% of the S&P 500. Think about that for a second. One single company is almost a tenth of the entire U.S. equity market's direction. It is no longer just a stock ticker. It is a fundamental macroeconomic indicator. If they sneeze, the global economy catches a cold.
Let's talk about the numbers. What are the expectations for tomorrow? Because they have beaten expectations basically every time for the last 2 years.
The expectations are absolutely massive. The market is looking for revenue around $65.6 billion just for the quarter. That is up roughly 67% year over year.
Wow.
And earnings per share expected around $1.52.
67% growth for a company of that size is absurd. Usually when companies get this big, the law of large numbers kicks in and growth naturally slows down. You can't double the size of an elephant as easily as you can double the size of a mouse.
It is historic. We haven't seen anything like it. But here's the problem. They are running into beat fatigue.
Beat fatigue.
Yeah, merely beating those numbers isn't enough anymore. The market has priced in absolute perfection. They demand blowout forward guidance to justify the current valuation. If they come out tomorrow and say, hey, we hit our numbers and we expect to hit them again next quarter, the stock could actually drop.
That's incredible.
The market needs to hear, we are accelerating.
It feels like the bar just keeps getting raised higher and higher every 3 months. But where is all this money coming from? Who has $65 billion to spend on computer chips in 3 months?
It's the CapEx splits. We call them the hyperscalers, the big cloud and social media giants. They have signaled a collective capital expenditure spend of $650 billion to $700 billion for 2026.
$700 billion.
Yeah.
In one single year. That's larger than the GDP of most countries.
Just for 2026 alone. And most of that is going straight into AI infrastructure. We are talking about data centers the size of small cities, cooling systems that require actual rivers of water, and of course, the chips that go inside them.
Now, there is a fierce debate right now about whether this is sustainable. Is this a sugar high? Are they overbuilding?
That is the trillion-dollar question hanging over the market. Is this front-loaded spending that will completely crash once the initial data centers are built? Or is this a structural shift, like building the electrical grid 100 years ago?
The electrical grid analogy is interesting because you build the grid once and then you just maintain it. The big spend is up front.
Right. The bulls argue that we are just laying the copper wire for the next century of digital commerce. Once the grid is there, the software and services, the appliances that plug into the grid, will generate trillions in value. But the bears say there is no way the software revenue justifies this massive hardware spend yet. They call it the field of dreams build-out.
If you build it, they might come.
Exactly. Might come.
And there's a lot of skepticism about circular revenue, right? I've seen this mentioned heavily in the bearish analyst reports we reviewed.
Yes, the circular AI deals. This is a bit of a, well, it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it actually has legs. This is where big tech invests billions into an AI startup.
So like a major cloud provider investing in a new foundational model startup.
Right. They invest the cash, but then that startup turns around and uses that exact money to buy cloud credits and chips from the big tech provider who just invested in them.
So the money literally just goes in a circle.
Right.
The big tech firm gives money to the startup gives the money back to the big tech firm for server time.
Exactly. It inflates the revenue numbers for the cloud provider. It makes it look like there is massive organic demand from the market, but it's actually vendor-financed revenue. The market is watching closely to see how much of the revenue is coming from real enterprise adoption like banks, hospitals, retailers deploying AI versus these circular venture bets.
So the narrative has really shifted over the last year. It used to be, will AI work? Are the models smart enough? Now it seems to be, how fast can we physically build the infrastructure?
Exactly. And that shift brings us straight to the physical reality of the situation. We talk about the cloud like it's magic, but the cloud is made of metal, silicon, and electricity. And you've brought some research today suggesting there is a hidden bottleneck that most people aren't even paying attention to.
Let's go there. This is honestly my favorite part of the deep dive, where we get nerdy about the hardware. Segment 4, the constraints.
Right, because everyone focuses on the GPU itself, the chip design. But the constraint isn't just making the chips anymore. We have gotten pretty good at etching silicon. The real constraint is packaging.
Okay, explain packaging to me like I'm a smart investor who totally skipped engineering class. Why is putting the chip in a package so incredibly hard?
Okay, so everyone knows Moore's law, right? Making transistors smaller and smaller. Well, we are hitting the physical limits of that, but the advanced AI models we want to build require chips that are physically larger than what we can legally, well, physically manufacture.
Larger? Why can't we just print a bigger chip? We need a bigger brain, just make a bigger piece of silicon.
Physics gets in the way. There is a thing called the reticle limit.
The reticle limit.
Yeah, it's basic optics. A lithography machine, the extremely expensive machine that prints the chip patterns using extreme ultraviolet light, has a maximum field of view. It's like a stencil. You cannot print a single silicon chip larger than that specific square, which is about 800 square millimeters.
So if you need an AI brain bigger than 800 square millimeters, what do? You can't just print it in one piece.
You have to stitch multiple chips together. You take 2 or 4 or 8 individual chips, and you place them side by side on a microscopic base layer called an interposer. That process of stitching and connecting them so they act as one single brain is called advanced packaging. The specific term everyone needs to know right now is CoWoS.
CoWoS. That stands for chip on wafer on substrate.
That's the one. It's a packaging technology developed primarily by TSMC. Think of it as building a superhighway between the logic chip, which is the brain, and the memory, which holds the data. If that highway is slow, the AI is slow, no matter how good the chip is.
So instead of one big chip, it's a mosaic of chips acting perfectly in sync like one.
Exactly. And here is the kicker. Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company TSMC is practically the only company in the world that can do this at scale for AI chips.
So TSMC is the bottleneck.
They are the ultimate gatekeepers. Other fabs are trying, sure, but TSMC is the only one with the yield and the massive volume right now. Production of these CoWoS packages has doubled. They were at about 75,000 wafers a month in 2025. They are aiming for over 130,000 in 2026.
That sounds like a massive amount of growth. Doubling physical capacity in a year is hard for any factory.
It is huge, but here's the problem for everyone else in the industry. The leading GPU maker has reportedly booked 60% of that capacity.
60%.
They effectively locked out the competition. If you are a rival chip maker trying to make an AI chip to compete, you are fighting for the scraps of that remaining 40% with everyone else. This company didn't just win on chip design, they won on supply chain mastery. They bought the capacity before anyone else realized how critical it was.
That is incredible leverage. It's like owning the railroad tracks, not just building the best trains.
Exactly. And I understand this gets even more complex as we move to the next generation of memory.
Yeah, HBM4, high bandwidth memory, generation 4.
Right. To run these massive AI models without latency, you need memory that is incredibly fast and sits right next to the logic chip on that interposer. HBM4 requires even more complex packaging with a 2048-bit interface.
A 2048-bit interface.
It effectively doubles the number of microscopic wires connecting the memory to the processor. Imagine trying to solder twice as many wires in the exact same amount of space without any of them touching or overheating. It is an engineering marvel, but it is incredibly difficult to manufacture. Yields are going to be a real struggle for the industry.
You also mentioned something in the research about glass.
Yes. Glass substrates. This is the future we are looking at, maybe 2027 or 2028. Right now, the base layer, the interposer we just talked about, is made of silicon or organic material. But silicon bends when it gets really hot, It warps.
Warping sounds very bad when you're dealing with microscopic wires that need to align perfectly,
Very bad. Glass is stiffer and significantly flatter.
like a window pane.
Exactly like that. Because it's flatter, you can focus the lithography light much better, which means you can pack the connections even closer together. And it handles heat better. It will allow us to make super chips that are absolutely massive, like panel-sized chips.
If I'm a listener, why does this deep dive into packaging matter to me? I'm not building a fab. I'm trying to understand the economy.
Because if you want to know when AI will actually get smarter, don't look at the software releases in Silicon Valley. Look at the packaging capacity in Taiwan. The rate at which we can stitch these chips together physical dictates the rate of global AI progress. It is the literal speedometer of the global economy right now. If TSMC stumbles on CoWoS, the entire AI revolution slows down.
That is a great way to put it. It's the bottleneck of the bottleneck. But of course, when you have a physical resource that is the speedometer of the global economy, nations start to get very, very interested.
Which brings us perfectly to sovereign AI and geopolitics.
This is a term we are hearing more and more in the briefings,
Mhm.
sovereign AI. It sounds almost like a declaration of independence.
In a way, it is. Compute capacity is now being treated as a top-tier national security asset. Just like nations hold strategic reserves of oil or gold, they now want reserves of GPUs. They realize that if they rely entirely on American cloud providers, their digital destiny is ultimately controlled by Washington.
It is the new oil.
Precisely. And we are seeing a massive pivot, particularly in the Middle East. Look at the UAE and Saudi Arabia. For decades, they were the world's energy exporters. Now they are pivoting hard to become intelligence importers.
They are using the old oil money to buy the new oil.
Correct. Look at Project Stargate. This is a massive data center expansion partnership, famously between an American tech giant and G42 in the UAE.
And the scale of this is huge, right?
The sovereign AI market is estimated to be an $8 billion opportunity right now, but it is growing incredibly fast. But it's not just about buying chips, it's about data sovereignty. Governments are mandating by law that their citizens' data stays within their physical borders.
So you can't just process things on a cloud server in Virginia anymore if you're a bank in Dubai.
No. If you want to serve the Middle East or Europe or parts of Asia, you have to build the physical infrastructure there. You have to have the GPUs on the ground in those countries.
But this creates massive friction with the U.S. government, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The U.S. is very protective of this cutting-edge technology.
Huge friction. Export controls are the weapon of choice here. The U.S. government is restricting exactly what chips can go where. We've seen strict restrictions on sales of the advanced chips to China, and now there is intense scrutiny on sales to the Middle East for fear that those data centers might be a backdoor for adversaries to train models.
It's the Silicon Shield concept playing out in real time.
Yes. Despite all the talk of building new fabs in Arizona or Germany, the absolute cutting edge of advanced packaging that CoWoS we talked about is still concentrated heavily in Taiwan. That keeps the geopolitical tension incredibly high. The Arizona plants are helping, sure, but the cutting edge stays in Taiwan. If anything happens in that region, the entire global AI stack just freezes.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We've covered a lot of ground today on this deep dive. We have a tariff war, suddenly initiated by a zombie law from the 70s. We have a labor crisis sparked by creative destruction. A market holding its breath for one company's earnings, a packaging bottleneck in Taiwan, and a geopolitical race for compute.
If you zoom out, you see a world that is polarizing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. That is the theme we are seeing, multi-dimensional polarization.
Break down those specific splits for us, just to summarize for the listener.
First, you have the split in the stock market. AI-driven sectors versus traditional sectors. One is booming, investing billions, while the other is struggling with these sudden tariffs and sticky inflation.
Second,
The split in the actual economy. High-skill capital owners, the people who own the AI infrastructure or the stocks, versus displaced labor. The Schumpeter creative destruction that Governor Cook warned about. The rewards right now are aggregating to the top faster than the new jobs are trickling down to the bottom.
and the third split.
The geopolitical split. Nations with domestic compute capacity sovereign AI versus those without. The haves and the have-nots of the digital age. If you don't have the compute power locally, you can't train the models, and you essentially become a client state of those who can.
It really is a constructive but fragile outlet for 2026.
That is the phrase of the day. Growth is incredibly resilient because of this massive $700 billion AI spend. It's single-handedly propping up GDP, But the risks, the tariffs, the labor displacement, the sticky inflation are higher than they have ever been.
So for you, the listener, the advice is to watch the spread.
Watch the gap.
Right.
The gap between the winners and losers is where the friction is, but it's also where the real opportunity lies. Don't just look at the headline index numbers. Look at the disparity beneath them. Look at who actually has the packaging capacity. Look at which specific jobs are being automated versus augmented.
I want to end with a provocative thought, something for everyone to chew on after the show.
Go for it.
If AI is indeed creative destruction, as the Fed says, we are currently living through the destruction phase of the old rules. Trade laws are breaking. Hiring practices for entry-level workers are breaking. Traditional chip designs are breaking.
The creation phase is coming, absolutely, but we have to navigate a very chaotic 2026 first.
Exactly. And in an economy where intelligence is becoming a manufactured utility, just like electricity, something you just plug into the wall and access, what happens to the inherent value of human intuition?
That is the ultimate question. When the machine can do the logic perfectly, the human value must shift to something else entirely. Perhaps judgment, perhaps empathy, or perhaps just knowing which questions to ask the machine.
Something for you to mull over as we all watch the tickers tomorrow. Thank you for listening to the Pro Ticker Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you on the other side of the earnings report. Stay curious.